go. Okay, guys, I'm on a mission to help you all improve the aging process as I'm on a mission. My personal goal is to improve how I age so I thrive as I get older. As most of you know, my dad passed away a year and a half ago, and I've really opened my eyes up to really even more what can we do now at, say, age 50 to improve how we're showing up to life when we're 80. And I'm actually at my mom's house today in Palm Desert, and all of her friends are all 80s and seeing all the changes. And it's more men than women, too. So men really need to really look at all this stuff. So I wanted to kind of tie into the theme on the show lately on how we can be health optimizers and get some data, test and not guess, so we can improve who we are in our future life or as our future self. And I listened to Hannah on our Wild Health Precision Medicine fellowship course I'm in and thought this was so fascinating. And I know a lot of you are health optimizers and taking ownership of your health. So Hannah is joining us today. So thanks for coming on and sharing this testing we're going to dive into.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Debbie. I'm super excited to chat and unravel all of these intricacies with epigenetics, DNA methylation, biological aging. It can be, a heavy topic for some, but really breaking it down as simple as possible, I think will be super helpful for your listeners.
Yeah, I just find it so important to put all this together as we went with Dr. Matt Dawson. Actually, yesterday I recorded with him on the Clarity Report, and I'm doing the program myself to add this into my own coaching program, but just how my own results, how you think you're fit and healthy, but really what can we do to be fit and healthy from the inside out and getting clues to know, am I on the right track? Am I doing everything I can do now to improve my future self? Because sometimes we just don't know unless we look at the genetics, look at our labs, and really put it all together. So tell me about your company, your co-founder, True Diagnostics. What is it all about? Why did you start it? What's your purpose mission?
Yeah, I love that you start out with this question too, Debbie. So, I've always been interested in science since I was a little girl, right? Basically, how the world works from more of a underlying biological standpoint, right? I'm from Ohio originally, ended up coming to Lexington, Kentucky to attend UK and wanted to become a veterinarian, wanted to become a genetic counselor. I switched degrees that would kind of match my interest at the time, but it always fundamentally came back to loving and understanding science and really wanting to help people as well. So right outside of college, I took a pretty unique job at a integrative pharmacy in Lexington that really sold a lot of unique products. And that's where I was first introduced to kind of this longevity cash pay medicine space. I like remember when it clicked, right? When you learn about kind of this healthcare model instead of this sick care model that is kind of ingrained into us as we grow old, more of that insurance type of billing model. So at the pharmacy, I led a lot of sales. I created different educational platforms to educate and encourage those on recommended dosing for some of those unique products. But the one thing that was missing was how can we prove these products are working, right? What is the efficacy? People feel better with all these, medications, peptides, things of that nature, but we need more data, right? This is a data-driven world. This is a technology-driven world. And the one way we wanted to do that was say, okay, well, what is the biggest risk factor? Where can we make the largest impact on someone's life? And it is aging, fundamentally, right? We'll talk about this a little bit more, but we know aging is the number one risk factor for all-cause mortality and morbidity. I say that probably like dozens of times a day because it's just fundamentally true. And again, not a new idea. So that's really where the idea was born in terms of aging, but have fundamentally always loved science, helping people. We then kind of went down a whole journey and rabbit hole on finding out how to measure this, and the best way to be able to measure that through epigenetic DNA methylation. And True Diagnostic was born.
What is DNA methylation? To explain maybe that in epigenetics, if people aren't familiar yet.
Yeah. I think if it's okay, Debbie, I'll even explain genetics versus epigenetics beforehand as a good way. Yeah, which I know you've spoken about. So genetics, that's your blueprint. It's not going to change, right? You get 50% from parent one, 50% from parent two. It's the same in every single cell type in your body. You measure it once, you know your disease based on your genomic risk, your predispositions, but again, it's not going to change. It's kind of sad. When you think about it, it makes me feel a little bit sad and you know, my chest a little tight. Because there's not much, there's really nothing you can do about that. But there's this idea of epigenetics where you're looking at modifications on top of your DNA. This is the software of your body. It's the software to the hardware of your genomics. It's telling your genomics how to function. So this is going to be different in every single cell type. Your eyes are going to have different genes that are on and off compared to the genes in your heart. That's why you get a completely different organ system, right? So the epigenetics is a way to kind of modify that DNA expression where it's, you know, on social media right now, a really big, sexy topic is you are what you eat. Your DNA is not your destiny. Food is medicine. And all of those are actually defining epigenetics without really saying it. So it's, again, genetics is more of that nature. Your epigenetics is going to be that nurture, really how your behavior, how your environment, how fundamentally everything you do is going to be affected. That's 80% of it too, Debbie. 80% is epigenetics, 20% is going to be genetics.
Yeah. So good to note 80-20 isn't just your workout routine, zone 2 versus your HIIT training, but it's your 80% epigenetics versus 20% genetics, which shows really how we need to take ownership of our own health because the choices we make really impact the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you know, it's so interesting because, you know, the probably number one question I always get is, well, how do I lower my biological age, right? What can I do about it? And my answer is always the same, which we can get into some of these more specifics later, but you have to start at what you can control, right? Your lifestyle factors. I think that's a pretty simple narrative. And it turns it becomes a harder conversation when people aren't willing to, you know, really put in the effort and make it more of their lifestyle, more of their habitual routine, because it really is your environment, right? It's, you know, what you wake up every day and what you're excited about or not excited about, which could also be triggering different things to become turned off or on in the body. Thus being, again, positive or negative for your health, depending on that.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting how many different tests there are out there for determining biological versus chronological age. And I know I own Pnoe metabolic testing kit, so I can do metabolism testing, and there's a biological age marker on there, but it's based on your VO2 max, your fat burn, and metabolic efficiency. So your metabolism. And so it's fascinating to look at, okay, this is how you are in this marker, but there's other ways. And your test, Tru Age Diagnostics, how are you determining? And I know we'll get to my report for a little brief example, and I'll do a separate podcast going through it all, but there's tons of data and research put this together because I know, I don't know, I see other clients get these tests that they paid for. I'm like, it just did your telomeres. It's not really telling, what are you using with this data? So testing, getting the information, and then action items, I think putting all together is an important thing we'll get to. But anyways, question is, what do you guys do or use to create that true age?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And you know, to be quite honest and fair, you can create a biological age with anything, right? You can say, I'm going to time you from going to point A to point B and, you know, divide it and multiply it and subtract. And here's, you know, an equation for biological age, right? I know that's a silly example, but it's true. You know, obviously markers with more scientific backing are going to be better than that equation I kind of just threw out there. So this kind of goes through, you know, several, kind of almost a checklist of things we want to look at, even when just kind of validating the epigenetics, the DNA methylation epigenetic clocks we're using. That's what we use at Tru Diagnostic. Then we can ask ourselves several questions to really validate if those clocks would be the most useful. And, you know, being agnostic, some of the things we want to really ask are they published? And are they publicly available in a peer-reviewed journal? I know that sounds a little silly and intuitive as well, but a lot of these clocks, a lot of these epigenetic biological ages are not published. And we joke that it's like going to a fortune teller and kind of just guessing that what they're telling you is true. Right? Because you want to be able to rely on it and understand the literature. Going back to your point, Debbie, I have this score. What do I do about it? And to really understand how it moves, we do need to look at it in more healthy human men and women published clinical trials.
Yeah, we're not mice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So when you had it, let's just start from the beginning. So to do a test, well, why would I want to do it? And then how? So let's start kind of the beginning, the
Yeah,
why
definitely.
and the how, and then go into reporting.
Yeah, I think in terms of you mean in terms of just the logistics then, Debbie?
No,
Or-
why would I want to get this test done? Give me your sales pitch. If someone said like, well, who cares? Why do I need to know this information?
Yeah, focusing on your aging is critical. I know I already mentioned this, right? Where aging is that number one
Mhm.
risk factor for basically every single disease. But one thing to note, this is a new statistic that came out. If you completely cure cancer, there's a magic pill for cancer. You only add about 3 years to average lifespan.
Hmm.
And if you completely cure cancer and heart disease adds 4 years on top of that. Those are the two top diseases, the killers in the US. You can only add 7 years of lifespan. And that's just lifespan. That's not even health span, right? Those healthy years at the end of your life. So people will continue to get old. They'll get frail, right? Which is the reason why we need to measure this.
Mhm.
It is fundamentally, again, that biggest risk factor. So tackling it and first noticing it as one is really the goal. Because if you are able to slow down that aging process, not only may you be able to prevent other outcomes in the future, but you can even delay the onset, right? Delaying the onset is probably more reasonable, but you absolutely want to try and get to that prevention later on. So there's a lot of other benefits with measuring aging, with studying aging, why you should test. If we all increased our lifespan by 1 year too, which is not that hard, you add about $34 billion of productivity to the economy. So there's a lot of economic impact.
Oh,
Um,
that's interesting.
and yeah, what's even more interesting, Debbie, too, is our national debt in the US is 24 billion, right? So we're already kind of seeing that change. And again, the first thing we need is a good test to measure and track it. And we believe True Diagnostic has that. So
So we can say help our deficit or debt by living longer. So we'll spend more money.
exactly, that's the goal, right?
That's funny. No, I think it's important. I always just as I said, I own this metabolic testing kit and how hard it is for me to sell it to someone. Like why would you not do this test? To me, it's just so many people just are afraid to know or to take action or just rather not just not have this knowledge. And so I was just curious of, how do you get people to understand how important this information is so they have more tools in their toolbox to improve the aging process so they can live a longer quality life. I always want to put that word in there that's not just live longer, but live longer better. And
Yeah.
that quality of life is so essential.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think going back maybe to even more of like the why, right? Like the emotional attachment or reason too. It does make me even emotional saying like, why are we here, right? Why are we living? What are we doing? And I want all of my friends, my family, I want them to live as long as I'm living, right?
Yeah.
So it's all about kind of that why too, which I think some healthcare providers might lose even in the cash pay space. Because again, it's more about that conversation and that intimacy. Do you want to be 80 years old and be able to, get a puppy, right? Take that puppy on a walk. Do you want to start a new business? Do you want to see your great grandchildren grow up as well and fall in love and get married? So I think there's more to it than we usually talk about. Usually we talk about it only surface level in terms of just trying to live longer. But I think if you dig a little bit deeper into the why, it starts to really connect with some people too.
Yeah, I always love the question, what's your why? What drives you? What's your purpose? What's your mission? What's your
Yeah.
passion? And a lot of people don't know that. So if you don't know that, take time and journal it night or something. So let's go into how you test, and then I want to go into what do we get from this test result.
Mhm. Yeah, so how you're going to test is essentially choosing between two products, right? We have kind of our complete kit, Debbie, that's the one I know you did, where you get all the markers. I highly, highly recommend starting out with that complete kit. You're going to get, an age we created with Harvard, pace of aging we created with Duke and Columbia. We're getting ready to come out with a symphony age, which is the aging of 11 different organ systems that we created with Yale. So you really get this, kind of smorgasbord or picture of aging. And that can be really useful, but it can also be a little bit overwhelming. But I think it's important to note that aging is extremely multifactorial, right? We have to provide you with a lot of information because we're going to use that information synergistically to create a treatment framework for you. So I do recommend doing that complete kit. It's a simple finger prick blood test. So you could do this at home. You just prick your finger, you fill out a little card. I'd love to hear your experience with that, Debbie. And you just ship it back into us. We own our lab in Lexington, Kentucky as well. So we don't outsource to any other third parties, which is great. We're the only people touching your sample here. We're a CLIA certified lab, meaning we check all the boxes in terms of rules and regulations. And then you'll get your results back, and one of us can hop on a phone call with you and really help you understand them and digest them. But we always do suggest a healthcare provider or working with a healthcare provider to really focus on a plan right for you, including other maybe tests like the genetic, like some of the tests that you've done, Debbie, right? Again, more of that holistic picture, looking at everything.
And I think that's what we'll get to today too, is actionable items, because I just think people get that are in the biohacking, whatever you want to call it, space, that are health optimizers. But what are you doing with all this data you're collecting? Are you just having a big old file folder filled with all your reports? Or are you doing something from that? And that's why when I do my metabolism testing, I charge probably $100 more than someone else, because I'm going to get more intake forms. I'm going to assess the results, and then we're going to have a meeting to go over how can you implement this into what you're doing and make some adjustments, and let's set some goals up and action it. Because to me, it's like a waste of time. Don't bother testing if I'm just going to give you a piece of paper back. But that's kind of what this is.
Right.
There's all these forms. It's very overwhelming when I look at them. I'm like, I don't know where to start. So I think it's important to work with someone to guide you that's an expert in the area for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And to make reasonable changes too, right, Debbie? I forget who I was listening to on one of your episodes a couple weeks ago, but they were talking about certain workout regimens too. And it's like, people enter these intense kind of like workout programs or regimen, and then they don't even finish the first week because it's just such a drastic change to their life. So I think being reasonable and setting expectations, or at least trying to make a commitment to yourself where you're really, really trying, and giving yourself a little bit of grace if kind of you're not as strict as you wanted to be too. So all about reasonable changes that really start with lifestyle, then entering in some supplements if you choose to. You could also go the medication or procedural based therapy route, which we can talk about some as well.
Yeah, because I always think of it, people have weight loss goals. I like to say fat loss and increased lean body mass, but weight loss is more people understand. But really, what we want to do is get stronger, lose body fat, increase metabolism. And then we've got the performance bucket. And then we have longevity, the aging process. So, taking that into consideration when we're looking at a report and the genetic report we went over clarity, you really can put all this together and looking at your functional lab test to really personalize a program, which is what I love to do. It's like, all right, let's get all this and figure out what Debbie needs to do to live her best life, especially knowing that my dad had different diseases. And I was just thinking today, his sister is just not doing well, and their parents died. I think my grandma died when she was 80, maybe. My grandpa didn't make it to 80. So then you think about, oh, my dad's sides, their genetics are not good. What can I avoid going through that pathway to take ownership now? And just, I think knowing, I think, is better to be a little bit ahead of the curve. So
Yeah.
what do
Yeah.
you want to share my report? Do you want to start there, or
Yeah, let's go ahead and
time?
go through it. And yeah, if you want even more of those kind of targeted outcomes as well, Debbie, after we go over these larger ages, it could definitely help add some context as well for really what to work on. So yeah, here you can see, the content index. Debbie did that full panel with us, so she's gonna get it all. She's gonna get everything that's included in that complete report. So if you want to scroll down, Debbie. right there. Perfect. Scroll up just a little. Right there. Cool. All right. So this is our new omic age. We created this one with Harvard, like I mentioned. It is the best in class biological age predictor. And best is definitely subjective, but the reason I mentioned that it's the best is because it is the most predictive of all-cause mortality and morbidity. And again, that's really the key here, is it has to be predictive of specific outcomes. So Debbie, yours looks awesome. You are going to be lower. You're going to be younger. So I know it's a little bit hard to see right there, but your biological age, your omic age, is going to be about 50.12. So you're lower than your calendar age by about 2.20 years. We, of course, want to see reduction here. Anything that's lower is actually super impressive. It's hard to get these markers lower, especially this omic age report, Debbie, because the omic age report is a historical based biological aging process. And what I mean by that is it's capturing everything across your entire lifetime up until now. So think back to, childhood trauma, think back to specific life events, really large stressors that could have happened, any type of disease diagnoses, any types of, I know I mentioned stressors, but maybe to be a little bit more specific, things like pregnancy, things like surgeries, things like disease, even flu or viral infections like COVID-19. Granted, you can, recover from those, and it's actually reflected in biological aging based on a couple studies, which is great. But all of those at one point can actually advance this clock. So this is awesome. You're doing great, Debbie. I want to
I
give
don't
you.
think it's awesome though. I want to be 40. To me, that's not good enough. I wanted to be 10 years younger. So I'll have to look at the whole report, see what do I need to do to get to be the 42, not 50.
Yeah. Yeah, I can tell you definitely have that, that competitive nature
Yeah,
about yourself, which is great. I'm the
that's
same
not
way.
good enough.
Yeah. Yeah, the 50.12 looks good. What's even more impressive too is it says your omic age is in the 28th percentile. So right there in that box, move your cursor up. Yeah, just a little bit right there. Yeah. So that means you're doing better, Debbie. This is where it gets super impressive. You're doing better than about 70% of the true diagnostic population. So you're doing better than about 70% of a really, really healthy population. And again, those are people who've taken the true diagnostic test, right? So people who are going to pay cash for this, they're going to be super, healthy. They're going to be involved in their own health. Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't it be amazing if doctors' insurance would cover this? So that, because I was just talking to my client about how labs, CRP, vitamin D, I mean, just the right lipid panel doctors don't do because of insurance. But if you think how many people don't do these tests because they have to actually pay cash for it and not covered by insurance, just like how much of an impact we can make in this world in our aging process if we actually tested under insurance so people would do it.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think we're getting there, right? With some more kind of specific disease risk or scores. Those are called MRSs, methylation risk scores, where you may be able to bill for insurance later on, but it's going to be for a specific disease, right? We know aging is not considered a disease by the FDA right now. It's very unregulated kind of territory because of that. But there is possibility in the future.
Mhm. Yeah. So this part here, and if we can touch on I have a red score, but first of
Yeah.
all, what is this test from? Is this from the combination of the blood and the
Yeah.
genetics? What were you saying?
Super interesting. So all of the outcomes you see here are just based on DNA methylation and epigenetics. We can predict almost anything through the lens of epigenetics. And that's where then you get more into kind of these epigenetic biomarker proxies, or what we call EBPs, or kind of MRS scores, these methylation risk scores. Because in the creation of this algorithm, Deb, we actually measured 27,000 in targeted proteins, 8,500 metabolites, 61 clinical lab variables, and about 1 million DNA methylation markers. So we're really training this algorithm with as much data as possible, and then saying, okay, well, out of every single outcome we tested, which is the most statistically significant or correlated to aging? And if I can walk you through some of those as well. It's going to be hard to pick out what to work on for you because your score is so good. But if you go back to your reporting, you could even pull up your omic M age, kind of the expanded omic M age.
On this page, you mean?
It's a different report, actually.
Okay. So nothing else on this page you want me to go on to?
Scroll up to your disease risk real quick. Yeah, so that red score is just a guide or a key. We're removing that. So just showing you how to interpret more of the negative scores or red scores.
Okay.
Yeah, so for those
red
who
yeah,
you're all good. You're all good. For those who are listening and not watching, Debbie looks great. She has all green kind of negative disease risk. These reflect current risk. It's a relative risk. So we're not telling Debbie when she's going to die. We can't do that. It's not an absolute risk, but she basically has a lower risk for cancer, heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, COPD, depression, and death when you compare her to everyone at her same chronological age group. And again, that's what we expect to see, right, Debbie? Because you are younger biologically, and if you're younger biologically, you're going to be at a reduced risk for all-cause mortality and morbidity. So you got to give yourself some credit there.
So I always laugh, so what's your definition of longevity versus mortality?
Are you asking me in particular?
Yeah, because everyone says all cause mortality, and then we talk about longevity, but is it the opposite? Or you're gonna die or you're gonna live?
I think mortality is quantifiable, right? Maybe in terms of hey, this is when someone is considered dead, right? or has passed from death. It's kind of weird thing to say, right? There's a mortality rate, there's a death rate at which people are dying. I think we don't have a definition of longevity or a longevity rate or what that really looks like. It could definitely be defined, right? Where you could say the longevity rate in the US is everyone who's, male, female, that's above 120, right? And in, X condition, right? And you'd probably have to write a lot of criteria for that. But I think the biggest difference is death, mortality being more quantifiable.
So all cause mortality is just when you're going to die.
Correct. Yeah. So, yeah, that one you're showing here, this is still my favorite to talk about out of, probably all of them. The omic M age is becoming pretty close, but this is a pace of aging. So it's more of a 3 to 6 month running average of how you're currently aging. And you are at 0.87. This looks great. I know you probably want to be at 0.6 or even lower.
Not competitive.
Yeah, this means though you're aging, Debbie, 0.87 biological years for every one chronological year. And you can see you're below the average trend line for people of your same chronological age group, which is great. But I would usually try and shoot for as the goal to be at 0.75 because
down here
at 0.75, think of it in quarters. If you keep it there, which is not easy to do, I'll say, if you keep it there though, you're shaving a year off every 3 years, right? A biological year. So we kind of think about it in quarters. I don't like to get close to 1. I don't even like to get close to like 0.97 because of what you mentioned, that death in kind of chronic disease diagnosis goes up by 50% almost in each respective category over the next 7 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a really unique one in the way it's been validated, right? I think just in 2024 alone, granted this was available in 2022, it's had over I think like 75 published studies in peer-reviewed external, articles and cohorts. I think that's like 4 or 5 or more papers a week, which is pretty insane. So again, it's very well respected. It's the gold standard for N of 1 precision medicine. It really responds to interventions which we know benefit the underlying biological aging process. And what I mean by that is going to be caloric restriction. All right, so that's the only human clinical trial proving we can see reductions in this. Like you mentioned earlier, we're not rats, we're not mice. Although they may be helpful, those are introductory.
Hey, sorry, can you hear me?
Oh, hold on. We got another voice on here. Hold on.
Oh, sorry, I got you now. Sorry.
Hold on. Okay, thank you, Hannah. I just had to pause there, get the right screen set up. So if you guys are watching the video, this will help you more. So make sure you can get to the YouTube channel and see how you can be fit and healthy from the inside out looking at this test. So Hannah, where we were just looking at this. So my goal here is to get this down to 0.6 would be my goal as a high performer.
Yeah.
So then we have this other report. So did you want me to hop over here yet?
Yeah, definitely.
So
So I
we're
think,
here.
yeah, for that, Deneen didn't pace, remember just the recommendation for caloric restriction,
Yep.
or any type of, stress reduction mechanism to help lower that.
Hold
Um,
on. Sorry. So that's you're saying is that intermittent fasting, time restricted eating, like a 12-hour, or what? Do you have research on what that means?
yeah, just caloric restriction. So not necessarily
Okay.
fast,
Not
right?
fasting, just less.
Consistent, yeah, overall caloric restriction in healthy non-obese adults over a 2-year period, was that calorie randomized control trial that was actually published in Nature about a year ago from Duke in Columbia.
So question on that. If I'm testing someone's resting metabolism with my Pinoy metabolic testing kit, I get the resting metabolism, and then if they have, additional movement throughout the day, the TDEE, and then if the exercise, so we figure out their calories estimated. Is that would you kind of use that as optimal
Yeah,
I mean, the RMR test data?
yeah, you're exactly right. It's also going to be super specific per person, right? Like your 10% reduction isn't going to be the same as someone else's. Um, So it depends on, a couple things. Obviously, the metrics that you mentioned are going to be super helpful, but also your goals, right? Like if you want to put on muscle mass, if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, caloric restriction may, is definitely probably not going to be the best for you. So you have to be a little bit
Yeah.
careful there. Um, but that's really, again, when we talk about real published peer-reviewed literature, the one recommendation that we would make. And it's all, again, about healthier choices. So say, for example, Debbie, you're a meat eater, carnivore, and you eat breakfast sausage every morning and you switch from traditional bacon to turkey bacon, right? That's about a 10% caloric deficit already for the day, pending that you eat well the rest of the day. But it's just simple lifestyle hacks, where you can be a little bit more healthier in the decisions and choices that you're making that are really going to regulate and help epigenetics.
That's great. I just would say, I think I always have to be careful of the audience that when you tell limit calories to athletes and high performers, they do everything to the extreme. And so
Yeah.
the last 4 years, we're saying, don't do all the fasting everyone's talking about because it's metabolically unhealthy people. But if you are fit and active and exercising once or twice a day, you have to say, okay, is there other methods that eating less when people I get when I do the metabolic test barely are eating because they're trying to do all this fasting and OMAD, but they're also athletes. So it's like, is there other
Yeah,
methods to improve this?
those are my two exceptions. I'm like, if you're pregnant, if you're breastfeeding, right, and if you're an athlete, you need to be very,
Yeah.
very careful. Again, especially if you're looking to build muscle mass. So you need to take it with a grain of salt. But again, any type of stress reduction kind of methodologies as well is going to help keep that pace lower.
Yeah, I just have to add that in because that's been a big challenge last few years.
Yeah, yeah.
More is better, but what if you're metabolically healthy or not even metabolically healthy, active? Okay,
Yeah.
so this is a report we wanted to bring up to our attention too. So talk about this report.
Yes. So for those of you who, again, are just listening, we're seeing this report Debbie has pulled up. This is our expanded omic MH report, right? Now one thing that's awesome about the True Diagnostic Clocks is we don't just tell you an age and let you sit with it. We tell you why you're aging and what you need to work on. So this is, one of kind of the metabolites I picked out from Debbie's reports. I couldn't even pick out any clinical lab values because they were all within range and they looked really good. So this is a metabolite on the right-hand side of your screen if you're watching.
This one.
You want lower levels of this metabolite. Lower levels for this metabolite is better for aging. All right. So this is the 3-uri-dopropionate metabolite. And what this metabolite does, this is one we're very familiar with. They're not all that way. This is a substance that's part of the process process your body uses to break down components of DNA and RNA. Remember, the molecules that carry genetic information into your cells, into simpler forms that can be reused or removed from the body. So to, again, reiterate that, this metabolite forms when the body is breaking down certain genetic building blocks, and it's eventually converted into other substances that are useful for the body's function. So this is actually right on track with what we're talking about. It's important for maintaining healthy cells and efficient metabolism. Again, you want lower rates of this. Debbie's in the 90th percentile, 90.1 percentile here. So she's, higher than most people who compared to our same population. So what we would recommend, Debbie, for you, of course, is we want to lower it, right? We want to lower this number. And how do we reduce these 3-uro-dipropionate levels? Well, there's really kind of 3 recommendations I would make here for you. I can go into them each in depth a little bit more, but number 1, assess dietary protein intake. Since this metabolite is really involved in the breakdown of certain amino acids, as I mentioned, reducing excessive protein intake, especially from sources rich in organ meat kind of outcomes, might help. We want to aim for more of a balanced diet that meets but doesn't significantly exceed protein needs based on activity goals and health goals. So there, are certain amino acids that can be hard on this particular metabolite to break down. So that's number 1. Watching protein intake levels. Number 2 would be ensuring proper hydration. So, of course, this is crucial in just overall health. We need adequate water intake. This is going to support the filtering of this metabolite. If it's a little higher, it's going to support the kidneys and excreting waste products, including the 3-urido-propionate as well, so we can lower levels here. And then the last one is more kind of a monitoring recommendation, where we want to monitor liver and kidney function. These organs play a really critical role in metabolizing and excreting metabolites. So you want to ensure they're functioning properly through regular, health checkups you can use to manage levels. So what I mean by that is get your traditional lab values measured as well, right? Mm-hmm. This isn't the end all be all. This is a really great test that maybe gives you a direction to drive and to go deeper in. But we need those clinical lab values to manage more.
So that's a couple thoughts there that I think we've gotten to this one size fits all approach in the diet world, and people that are, keto, and then they're carnivore, and then they're doing this and that, and it works for some and doesn't work for others. And I think that's why it's so helpful to do all these tests to figure out what is best food for me. Combine that with intuition and pay attention to how you feel. And then there's always food sensitivities and gut health. But, it's the protein thing, trying to shift to more focus on muscle protein synthesis and spreading out that meal timing, as Dr. Gabrielle Lyon talks about, Dr. Donald Layman, and try to follow that. But then how much is more is not better, less is sometimes better, and finding the right amount for you as a unique bio individual is so essential, but challenging for people.
Definitely. Yeah. And again, it's really unique in the sense that we're now able to do this, just because if in previous kind of biological age clocks, or even ones you'll get, from different types of outcomes in testing, you just get that number, right? You don't necessarily get this additional information on what's driving the clock. So keep scrolling through, Debbie. Let me see if I can pick up anything else.
Another quick question though, what are these markers from? Because I don't think I did urine tests. I always think metabolites are more than a urine test. Where are they coming from? Blood or saliva?
DNA methylation in the blood. Yeah. So again, because we measure those 61 clinical lab variables, 27 in targeted proteins, and 8,500 metabolites, the machine learning then, or the AI, is really choosing which outcomes are most, correlated or predictive of your aging process. So again, this is a really new idea. We call these EBPs, or epigenetic biomarker proxies. So It's a completely novel technique. And, Debbie, what's really interesting is we can now predict over 4,000 of these outcomes after further investigation. So, the idea is that this is a really unique biomarker. It's going to be that one place one test to replace many in the future.
It's fascinating. And that it was just from one little blood drip off my finger to a card. That's what we can get all this from one little blood sample.
Yeah, one more that I may bring up too, you can see this is probably the one that's the most out of range, is that matrix remodeling associated protein 5 on the bottom right-hand side.
Oh, this one.
That one right there. This is more of a kind of general inflammatory marker as well. So this looks, pretty high on you. For those listening, Debbie is in the 98th percentile for this matrix remodeling protein. It's pretty kind of non-specific inflammatory marker, but involved in a lot of signaling pathways that promote synthesis and secretion of inflammatory cytokines. So, it can be linked to kind of this control of the extracellular matrix protein, which again increases during inflammation, and other different outcomes, cardiovascular, lung disease, autoimmune disease, other cancers as well. So again, very non-specific. Here, what we want to do, which again, you're probably doing already, Debbie, is making sure we're exercising, right? But again, not too much, because it can kind of be that push and the pull where you want exercise for its anti-inflammatory effects to help modulate the immune response, but you don't want too much to where we're putting it into overdrive. So that's can be a little bit of a hard balance to maintain.
It's a great point. I just did a video. I'm trying to do these rabbit hole videos of sharing articles by myself on my YouTube channel. And I think
Yeah.
it was a fascinating topic to dive into on too much exercise. A lot of the recommendations are, exercise is beneficial. Then we've got us in our world or endurance athletes, and I'm kind of more retired Ironman triathlete, but how many people do too much exercise and too much excessive exercise that they realize, oh, that might be causing excessive stress, oxidative stress, chronic inflammation, leaky gut, all sorts of different health issues that they might not realize that your exercise that you think you're doing is so healthy for you, but we're doing this much 2, 3 times a day or excessive volume that it is something to pay attention to.
Yeah, yeah. So, that's the other one that really kind of sticks out on your report. We see some of these other proteins being a little bit higher than the 80th percentile. Again, a lot of them do have to do with kind of the inflammation kind of involvement as well. So I think overall, maybe working, Debbie, on balancing kind of that inflammation, digging a little bit deeper into that, looking into a little bit of that liver and kidney health, just giving it maybe a little bit extra support, making sure those biomarkers look okay as you're doing your clinical lab testing too, just because of that 3-uridine propionate. It's a tongue twister metabolite. But yeah, you're just going through now, the
That's all the
rest.
definitions.
The definitions of the report. So you kind of go through and look at what you really need to target and work on. But again, the pace of aging looks great. Your deneen pace looks amazing. We want to, of course, keep that down, because again, the lower you keep that down for longer, the more you'll see your omic MH decrease over time.
Yeah, so I think it's great to say, show that you get this information. So if I have signs of inflammation, but my CRP level, my blood work is low in range, but my, looking at other markers, and then compare this to my clarity report. We went over a little bit yesterday or the episode before this, oxidative stress markers and looking at longevity markers. So it's so good to, what I learned as an FDN practitioner, we're more of a health investigator, and we're putting the different pieces of a puzzle together and getting 3 to 5 different labs, for example, and looking at the whole picture. And that's why I'd love to put this all together to see, well, is it because my exercise, or do I have other signs of inflammation in my gut, and doing a gut test? Because I've had over the years from my adrenal exhaustion, a long time ago, I had so my CRP was 0.15. So then it's kind of looking at, all right, this shows this, but then this is low. So is it something else going on? That inflammation is leaky gut microbiome related? Do I have parasite, pathogen, other thing that's driving that stress level up? So I think that's fascinating to, put it together and then create action items with the data collected in these reports.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the coffin, so to speak, right? Where if you want to optimize your health, I think you absolutely have to measure aging. I think it's a no-brainer. But as biased as I am, I would also say you can't just stop there. right? You
No.
do need everything. I love, Wild House offering the clarity, the lab values, the plans they come up with, literally everything they create for their patient from a holistic standpoint. And like you mentioned with the FDN practitioner, you're pulling in different things because you do need that whole body picture, right? You may have a low genetic risk for type 2 diabetes in your family, but because you were exposed or you're choosing a specific diet, your epigenetic risk could be increased, right? So you have all of these different risks. You need to look at all of them together. That way you can make changes based on those fundamental differences in the risk. And I think, people don't envision that as much. They think, oh, I have one risk, it's genetics. I'm doomed. I'm bound for this disease. But the power really is in your own hands now. And I think that's, again, yeah, super, super liberating, kind of coming back full circle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if people are interested in living a longer, better quality life, we should take ownership of our health, invest in our health, and purchase this test along with, there are other tests that you suggest, or just start with this and put it with, like, how do we get started? Where would you direct us?
Yeah, so if people want to get started, they can go to truediagnostic.com and order a test kit. If you have any questions, our support team is phenomenal. Support at truediagnostic.com. I'd love to speak with everyone or anyone. If you have questions, I love connecting with people. So I'm at Hannah at truediagnostic.com. I have my Everything Epigenetics podcast as well. If you really want to deep into the
Yeah.
science, it's definitely more science driven with researchers in this field. But
So
yeah,
good.
Debbie, love to even get you a code for your listeners to use as well if they're interested in taking the test with you and getting a discount.
Yeah, I for sure will do that. So we'll hook that up into the show notes. And I just find the more you can know and then put it all together and create personalized action items, but not being overwhelming. Less is
Yeah.
more, create base hits, create the home run. I think I get people that have this huge list and, they've got their Aura, their Whoop, and their Garmin and their Apple Watch, and they're doing the NutriSense, their CGM, and they're just doing everything. And then I just almost need to simplify it and just go, okay, let's just start with the basics and
Yeah.
get a little bit more clarity of what you need exactly, because they come to me with 20 different supplements that they heard about another podcast and uh, social media, and then they like taking this and that. And I think this information would help us kind of get more clarity on how to give people
Yeah.
more suggestions,
Yeah,
direction.
that's a great point. That's a great point as well, Debbie, because I always say, you know, you see a lot of social media things talking about even these clocks being correlated with lifestyle factors, right? And that's nice, but I think it's pretty intuitive, right? What we need to do from a lifestyle standpoint in terms of eating better, exercising to some degree. So when it's able to give you actually those specific recommendations and quantify that number one risk factor, that's really the point in driving it home, right? And more from that kind of testing perspective too, it's telling you what's working and what's not. It's giving you that real-time feedback, which I just think with all the medical information and devices we have nowadays is pretty invaluable and will save you money in the long run.
Yeah, just figure out, what do I need to work on right now to improve my health, and
Yeah.
then reevaluate. How often do you retest?
Yeah, about every 6 to 12 months, I would say. So, you could do the smaller kit, the Tru Age Pace kit, every 2 to 3 months if you really wanted to get more N of 1 precision back feedback. But yeah, we want to start testing, get a baseline. Even people are like, well, wait, I want to be really healthy and then take one. You want to take one now because you want to look
Yeah.
at the progress you're going to make over time, right? People always say, I
Hmm.
always say, well, wait, what if you took it 10 years ago? They're like, oh, that would have been crazy to see how far along I've come. So, yeah, I just encourage testing. Even if you're on the fence, maybe you can just do the cheaper test as well and only get a little bit, couple results.
And last thing, you just said, 10 years ago. Is it better to start doing this younger? Is there a certain age that we should start doing this?
Yeah, I mean, really anyone can do it. The clocks do act a little weird in really young populations. So I would say as a good rule of thumb, between 16 and 18 is usually
Mm.
okay. We have specific clocks for children. So if anyone does want to test and again needs a parent or guardian to sign off on that if they're under 18, we've tested, children before, but we would run a different analysis on them.
Cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time and kind of sharing some of the insights from my own report and how well we need to test and then get someone that's expert as yourself to help us guide us through it with maybe their own health coach to figure out what to do with it. Because there are like 10 different reports with so much foreign information on there that we need some guidance for sure on it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, thanks, Debbie. I'm super passionate about what you're doing as well. It was great, to get to learn a little bit more about you, and super excited to get some feedback from the audience as well. Thank you.
Great. Well, we'll get some comments on the video, and the podcast audio version will go out too, and show notes will have all the links for it. So thanks so much.